Bring on your worst dungeon. I am ready.
You know, when I think back to the beginning of my PC gaming career, there's a small handful of games that stand out as having really molded that experience and become core to who I am as a gamer. And while they're not necessarily the first games I ever played, because I did own a Super Nintendo as a child, they were games that I watched my dad play. They were games that I have very fond memories of. And, you know, after a bunch of nagging, I got my dad to set up a partition so that I could play a lot of the games he was playing on my own so that I could have my own saves and that sort of thing. And the very first one I remember is a game called Dungeon Hack. Welcome to the channel. My name is Shrimpicles, and in this series, we're going to re-examine some of the cherished classics from my childhood. We're also going to check out some games that I missed out on, and occasionally we're going to explore a brand new release. We'll play through the game and we'll see if in a modern gaming landscape they're really going to stand the test of time. This is Game Reflections. Dungeon Hack was developed in 1993 by Dreamforge Entertainment, and it was published by SSI. Interestingly enough, one of the other core gaming memories that I have is a game called Dark Sun Shattered Lands, and it came out that same year, also published by SSI. But as Alton Brown says, that's another show. If you're a fan of D&D games in the late 80s and early 90s, though, you're absolutely familiar with SSI's work. They're responsible for the Gold Box games, which were prolific for D&D fans in that time period. Dreamforge might be a little bit less familiar to you, but they developed several other D&D titles, such as Menzoberranzan and the two Ravenloft games. Now, Dungeon Hack sold 27,110 copies, and it received mixed but mostly positive reviews. It even received the notable award of Computer Game Review's Most Replay Value of 1994. Where it really suffered in the review department, though, was with its lack of story. One reviewer, GameSpy's Alan Roche, wrote, "If random creatures and meaningless hallways are your thing, you'll love Dungeon Hack. The rest of us at least need a little story to justify our monster butchery." Now, I'll admit I think that criticism is a little bit harsh on a game that styles itself as a dungeon crawler, but I'll touch on the title's lack of story a little bit later in the video. However, with those reviews, we know that right off the bat, Dungeon Hack is not a story-driven RPG experience. So what is it? Well, Dungeon Hack is often considered one of the first roguelikes. You create a character and you adventured through a series of randomly generated dungeon floors. As you journeyed through those floors, you face a variety of monsters, traps, puzzles, and a huge number of locked doors. And you do all of this while vacuuming up loot like an anxious dog scarfing up chip crumbs at a family barbecue. Now, all of these settings are customizable at the start of your game. You can set how many floors you want your dungeon to be, from 10 to 25. You have the option to activate things like the gimmicky underwater level, magic zones. You can customize your treasure availability, set your food consumption rate. You can adjust how often you're going to have to deal with traps, keys, pits, and you can even modify the quantity and difficulty of the monsters you're going to face. Finally, you can choose to activate permadeath mode with the character death real setting. This is where the real rogue comparison comes in. When you have this option selected, a death will delete all of the saves for that character. Dungeon Hack uses the 2nd edition AD&D rules, so we can expect to see things like percentile strength, descending armor class, and the ever-controversial THAC0. Now, luckily, I'm kind of an expert, so this isn't really a big deal for me, but if you're used to more modern games like Baldur's Gate 3, this might be a little bit of a interesting experience. There are major racing class restrictions in 2nd edition, along with a really strange way that 2nd edition AD&D handled multi-classing. The game is played entirely in first person as well, with a very small viewing window in the upper right-hand corner of your screen, and an admittedly highly intrusive user interface occupying the rest of it. The character pane, inventory, minimap, and controls are all present, but they're not, you can't close any of them, you can't move anything around. And on large modern monitors, this isn't really a problem. The view window stays pretty big. However, on small monitors, I very vividly remember it becoming quite cramped, and this is actually a point noted in numerous reviews, both past and present. Now, looking at the controls, you have movement arrows off to the bottom right, a compass that can be essential if you're involved in certain magical puzzles, and your character controls. You can click on your character's portrait to open up your character sheet, or you can activate the items held in your left and right hands by clicking the corresponding button. Your inventory has 3 pages of 18 slots, which gives you 54 backpack slots, as well as 3 belt pouches on the right-hand side of your character pane. Now, every item in the game only takes up 1 slot. However, with your backpack, you can put anything in it. Your belt pouch can only hold small items such as potions, keys, or apparently a spiritual hammer. For this review, I did a handful of playthroughs on various difficulties with various settings to familiarize myself with the game again. This includes one run with the permadeath feature activated. The playthrough you see on screen, however, will be a 25 floor run on what I describe as kind of an upperish medium difficulty. One thing to note, the settings in this game are all about personal preference. Some settings result in gameplay experiences that I personally found to be outright unfun to play, overly frustrating, convoluted, and as such, I omitted them from my main playthrough. Now, I debated taking a paladin through because my very first playthrough of this game, clear back when I was a little kid, I rolled a paladin and named him Dragon Slayer. I did a 10 floor easy playthrough, and I got poisoned on floor 9. I had no ability to cleanse this debuff whatsoever, and nothing I did allowed me to get to the healing station to get it cured. I would die over and over and over no matter what I did. I was devastated. And I realized the only way to solve this problem was to roll a cleric so that I could neutralize the poison spell. For this playthrough, all of that logic holds true. I know that the game has a very low level cap for single-classed characters, and doing a 25 floor run will likely get me to that level cap long before I defeat the final boss, and then I'm not progressing at all. The key is going to be to multi-class. Fighter, Mage, Cleric will spread my experience out 3 ways, and even with the game's imposed small level caps, I still have a sense of progression throughout the whole playthrough, or at least through a majority of it. Additionally, this combination is going to give me access not only to healing magic and neutralize poison, which is vital in my opinion, but also 2 of the most vital spells that a mage can bring: Improved Identify and Haste. Character creation time now, and this is where the quirks of 2nd edition AD&D already start to show and will become interesting for people who've only played something like Baldur's Gate. I'm limited to being a half-elf in order to play that chosen multi-class combination of Fighter, Mage, Cleric. With race and class selected, though, it's time to set my ability scores, and I use the word set intentionally. This is one of Dungeon Hack's charming little quirks. You can just choose what your ability scores are. Now, you can also roll them, but you can just click the button up and set them to what you want. And I definitely did this as a little kid, and while I didn't do it for a majority of my other playthroughs while I was refamiliarizing myself with the game for this review, including in my permadeath run, I did roll ability scores there. I'm about to progress through 25 unforgiving levels, and I'm maxing out my stats. Sue me. Once you select a name and a portrait, though, it's on to difficulty settings. You can either choose one of the preset difficulties or select custom and then tweak your settings to your personal preferences, which is what I'm doing for this playthrough. Looking back, I'll admit I'd have made some adjustments. I'd turn monster difficulty up, probably substantially, and I'd increase the pit frequency. I might even have turned on magical traps. But let's talk about some of the settings that I didn't turn on and why I didn't. Many of them are honestly just frustrating, and on some level, that just makes the game not fun. Multi-level puzzles, for example, suck. Period. You might need to do things several floors above where you're currently working, and if you missed them while you were up there, you have to backtrack. And there's no fast travel mechanic. You have to walk all the way back through the maze of a dungeon again and again and again, and you had no real way of knowing that there was something you needed to do there in the first place. It's honestly kind of a nightmare, and I hated it every time I've messed with it. The water level is fine. It's entirely negated by several easily accessible mechanics, especially as a cleric or a wizard, so no problem for the character that I'm creating here. I leave magical zones off in this playthrough, and I'll explain why. While they're not truly that difficult to deal with, magical zones have some quirks with DOSBox. Some zones cycle way faster than they definitely did back in the 90s, and that makes them very frustrating. You have things that maybe change your orientation really quickly and get very disorienting, or they drain your hunger meter and kill you. So I turn them off because they just don't work well, in my opinion, with modern PCs. Then there's Encounter Undead. This is an option that I'm still unsure if I should have left on for this playthrough or turn off. You see, turning this off limits the monster variety in Dungeon Hack significantly. There are 40 monsters in Dungeon Hack, but a lot of them are undead, and some only appear if you crank up the monster difficulty in the first place as well. So by the time we reach 25 levels, with where I set monster difficulty to and having Encounter Undead turned off, my variety of monsters really isn't very high, and I start seeing the same things over and over and over again. I do wish I'd increased the difficulty setting, but undead creatures I'm still undecided on, and that's because they do unfun things. Level drain and ability score drain was a prevalent mechanic in 2nd edition D&D, and losing levels or losing stats really kind of sucks, and I didn't want to deal with it, so I left it off. But I did know, and I do note now, that it limits the monster variety significantly. You'll notice at the bottom of the screen is the seed, and this allows you to play the same dungeon as a friend if you want. I've never tried this personally, but it's certainly an option. SSI and Dreamforge claimed upon release that over 4 billion different dungeons were possible with their randomization mechanics. I'm definitely not going to play the game 4 billion times to test this out, but it was certainly something that they made claim of. Now, I've edited things to be a bit out of order here from how the game will run if you choose to play it yourself. I showed character creation since I feel like it makes more sense with how the game should flow, but the most memorable part of the game for me is actually the introduction cutscene, which plays as soon as the game comes on before you even see the main menu. So feast your eyes and please shield your ears, the audio quality isn't that great.
Shadow, swamp, gloom and vine, a fog does rise to cloud my mind, to hide the prize I seek to find. O ancient orb, where rest you now?
My lady, I have answered your summons. I am prepared to...
Yes, I see it. A place of traps to crack brave bones. There lies the orb, far, far away. An ancient dungeon, and within it lies the orb.
It's a strong magic that can point to maps. Now, what will you be paying me to fetch the orb?
There lies gold and gem enough for any man. Take what you will, but return the orb to me.
You'll pay me now, or I'll never get there. I need horses, supplies...
Enough! Let the journey begin!
Hey, no, wait! No, wait!
Live or die, adventurer, but bring the orb to me.
Odds blood! My insides feel all twisted about. Shall we see what awaits? Bring on your worst, dungeon. I am ready.
And honestly, that's the plot of Dungeon Hack summed up right there. Mysterious floating lady sends random low-level adventurer off to some unknown dungeon to retrieve an orb for her. We don't know anything about this orb. We don't know what it is, why she wants it, even what it looks like. Also, how ridiculous is it that her payment scheme was take whatever else is in the dungeon, right? Exact opposite of the Cave of Wonders where it's just the lamp. No, we can have anything else, but since she's not willing to step foot in the dungeon herself, how does she know anything's actually in there? Another mystery, and one that's actually inconsequential to the game overall, is where this dungeon is located, since we got teleported there. Now, an interesting tidbit about the Dungeon Hack Online community is that they did try to figure this out. The only thing we know is that this game is based in the Forgotten Realms, because at the time that's what the license for D&D was for. And with that information, we're able to tell that this map that's on the wall in the cutscene is an old version of the Faerun map. And Feeling Bill 3102 on Reddit hypothesizes that with this information, he can place the dungeon somewhere near Aglarond and Akronul. So do with that what you will. I just thought it was kind of cool that somebody took the time to figure it out. Now, we're in game and I immediately encounter my first issue. For a game this old, the GOG version takes forever to load. Absolutely ages. This isn't just during the initial dungeon assembly either. It's every time you restore a saved game. It can take up to 4, sometimes 5 minutes to load. Now, I don't have the Steam version, so it might be better on that platform, but I tried the game on several machines at home, all using my GOG license, and I had the same issues every time. Monstrously long load times. Once in, I'm immediately confronted by an enemy. What a way to start the game, right? Luckily, our sword handles it easily enough. Now it's time for some more of those second edition quirks. We need to pray for and memorize our spells, and I'm going to show you the ultimate cleric hack here. Spiritual Hammer. It's OP, period. Seriously, it might actually be arguably the best item in the game, but it's likely actually just in second place. You throw it at the enemy, it returns to you Mjolnir-like, it scales with your level, deals a ton of damage. I'm going to use this spell a lot throughout my playthrough, and I have used it a lot through a majority of the playthroughs that I ran as a younger person. That said, there's one other weapon, like I mentioned, that stands out, the Rod of Smiting. And if you come across a Rod of Smiting in your playthrough, equip it immediately. Now, with my shiny blue hammers in hand, there's one last vital early game task, and that's casting Detect Magic, which is another reason to bring a mage. This spell is the best way to identify which items to keep and which items to skip at low levels. If an item glows blue, it's magical. However, there is a risk with magic items that are revealed purely by the Detect Magic spell. They might actually be cursed, and Detect Magic won't reveal that for you. True Seeing, which is a high-level spell, will, but Detect Magic just shows everything as blue. Now, cursed items can be a massive problem, especially early, because once you put a cursed item on, you'll get its negative effect, but you can't actually remove it without a remove curse spell of some sort. So despite the long load times, it's honestly sometimes worth saving first before equipping any magic item so that you can find out what its effects are and not have it wreck your game if you're willing to play that way. Now, you can also solve this by getting a scrying mirror or having a mage improved identify spell so you can just identify what it is. But if it's cursed, it's still in your hand to do the identification, so you can still kind of end up screwed. I did bring mage to have improved identify here, but you can only learn spells by inscribing scrolls into your scroll book, which is pretty typical for D&D. And I don't find that scroll. And spoiler alert, I don't find that scroll for a very, very long time. Alright, chores out of the way, it's time to explore. Well, you can click the buttons on the bottom right I'm going to be using my numpad through the entire playthrough, and I honestly recommend you do too. Using your numpad for movement allows you to keep your mouse poised over the action bars and over your inventory so that you can manipulate your potions, you can manipulate your spells, and you can utilize your weapons and move at the same time. The first level is pretty standard D&D fare. It's orcs and hobgoblins, nothing particularly alarming. One aspect of the game that I loved as a kid, and I'm actually surprised that I really still love as an adult, is the way that keys work in this game. I absolutely adore the distinct key types and the clever designs for the locks. And it's not just the keys themselves, but it's the door opening items. It's things like gemstones and feathers. They're very thematically appropriate for an ancient, eclectic, mystical dungeon, and it adds a lot of charm to the game, in my opinion. As I move through the rooms, you'll notice I check the walls closely and I explore every corner, including dead-end corridors. Items on the floor appear as small blue dots on your minimap, but those hidden in wall alcoves don't, and frequently these will have keys or the scrolls you need as a wizard or anything like that, so I pay extra attention to these areas and make sure to explore every nook and cranny. It's worth noting that the game is designed to be a monster-killing extravaganza. Monsters can drop crucial, powerful, and even advancement-critical items, so kill everything and make good use of that save button. The first floor is typically uneventful, as I mentioned, regardless of the difficulty setting. It's mostly about gathering a few items and getting a feel for the game. One thing I notice, though, as I progress, is that each floor features two types of monsters. However, as you approach the exit stairs of a level, you might encounter a monster that doesn't fit with everything you've seen, and this signifies you're somewhere near the stairs that lead down to the next level. Sometimes, this monster is indicative of what's on the floor down, which is kind of a cool preparation mechanic. But other times it doesn't mean anything, you just get a random one-off. It's just a quirk of the randomization system, I guess. But that leads me to some of the other wrinkles that randomization system has. Each floor has a randomized tile set. Floors, doors, walls, locks, levers, that kind of thing. This does add variety, and it attributes to that whatever billions of dungeons that the developers claimed you could access. But it's only skin deep because they don't always mesh together very well. Grimy grates in a luxurious marble level or carved intricate wooden doors against dirt and mud, it just feels strange and discordant, and I don't personally like it. I understand that the goal is to make each floor feel unique, feel like a new chapter of your adventure, with different monsters, tile sets, and themes. However, it misses that mark, in my opinion, more often than not because of how jarring the differences between the randomized options are. Now, another quirky aspect of 2nd edition D&D is that you can only cast mage spells while you're not wearing any armor. This means you're constantly taking off and putting your armor back on, and if you forget to re-equip it after casting a spell, that can leave you really, really vulnerable, as I experience here. It happens a few times throughout my run, and it's always something to be mindful of if you choose to play a mage, mixed with another kind of character who also wears armor. Growing up, one of my favorite things about Dungeon Hack was the monster design, and as I progress through the second floor, we encounter one of my favorites, the Bugbear. Look at those big two-handed axes, one in each hand. They just look cool, in my opinion, and I was excited to see them on my second level. Second level, though, not a lot going on here. So we enter the third level, and the randomizer gets it right. The tile set just feels like a dungeon to me. Dirty black brick walls and a grimy dirt floor. It's the kind of environment I can easily imagine as a setting for my next D&D campaign. The monsters in here, though, they're rough. Were-rats, they aren't really that bad, but those carrion crawlers. These gross worms have a paralytic bite that can just ruin your day. Let's talk about status effects for a second. Paralysis and poison are two of the most common status effects to worry about on any difficulty. Other status effects exist on the higher difficulties, like the level drain, petrification, etc. But paralysis, you're going to see all the time. Paralysis causes you to not be able to attack or cast. Now, you can still run away, but if you get caught in a bad spot, like trapped in a hallway between monsters, you're pretty screwed. Paralysis is going to wear off after a length of time, assuming you survive that long, which does separate it from the other status effects. Poison has to be cured with magic or one of the healing vending machines. Level drain has to be restored with a restoration spell, that sort of thing. Now, I want to talk about poison because poison is actually one of the most debilitating effects in the game, in my opinion. Poison is much more threatening, especially at low level if you have a small HP total. It doesn't go away until you cure it, like I mentioned, and it requires a gold coin, not a silver coin at the vending machine, and those are rare to come by. Poison wrecked my Dragon Slayer playthrough when I was just a little kid, and I think I still just have PTSD about it. Despite not needing to fear poison on this level, I still choose to play very carefully because of paralysis in my low HP pool. So I keep my distance and I throw spiritual hammers. This level also highlights a recurring issue that I faced during the playthrough. While focusing on recording and taking notes, which I'm getting used to, I just neglected the game itself on occasion. I entered a room here swarming with mobs, carrion crawlers, and were-rats, and I managed to fight my way through it. And after looting the room and checking walls, I somehow missed a key in the dead center of the room. I didn't pay attention to the dot on my minimap, I didn't see it across the room while I was searching, and that led to a frustrating few minutes when I found the door, but I didn't know where the key was. So I had to backtrack, pick up the fire key, and now we can advance. Throughout the course of the last 3 levels, I've gathered a variety of magical items, including wands, bracers, weapons, and several magical books. These books are incredibly powerful. There are 14 different books in Dungeon Hack, and they each have unique effects. Some grant ability scores, other provides a large chunk of XP, and a few are class and alignment specific. Now, this is a bit annoying to me that a game with minimal RPG elements could include such a heavy role-playing based mechanic, but that's just how it is. Unfortunately, even a learned wizard like my character didn't study the mystic arts required to read the titles of the books, which is crucial for understanding their effects. However, the magic seems to work even if you babble the gibberish phonetically, so you can experiment if you're so inclined, just maybe consider making use of the save button. As for the rest of the items, I continue to lack improved identifier for inscribing into my spellbook. Without this spell, or without a scrying mirror, you can experiment if you want to, but if you choose not to, your inventory fills up really quickly. As luck would have it, though, as I explore the 3rd floor, I open a particularly satisfying lock design and I find a scrying glass. This object is crucial for anyone who isn't a magic user or who hasn't found an identify scroll like me. The mirror has the power to identify any item you hold in the opposite hand when it's activated. However, it has limited charges, and you don't know how many charges are left until it disappears. And once you've used them all, it's just gone. So, magic mirror in hand, I identify some of the items I found, and one of them turns out to be one of the best items in the entire game. It's a ring of shocking grasp. You can see me actually get mildly excited here in the recording. You see, the ring has a big bug. It's supposed to only boost the damage of a bare-handed attack on the hand you're wearing it on. However, if you equip it in the left hand's ring slot, it will in fact bug out and increase the damage of all melee attacks made with both hands, even with weapons in them, by 10 to 14 damage. This is a huge bonus for melee builds, and it's a cornerstone of any melee build. As I'm currently throwing my hammers though, I don't get the damage bonus, so it's not that big of a deal to wear right now, but once we get our hands on some melee weapons, it's going to change. As I move from the 3rd to the 4th floor, I encounter my first real wave of disappointment. Despite the procedural generation engine and the 4 billion dungeons possible, I'm already facing duplicate monsters. Were-rats are present again. It's only been 4 floors, and that's really early in a 25-floor run to see duplicates. I admit this repetition is minor in a monster murdering game, but it's still kind of a letdown. It highlights some of the conversation that we had earlier about undead and monster difficulty really impacting the ability of your game to have variety. So take that for what it's worth. Luckily, the were-rats are accompanied by a brand new enemy, horrifying little shadow creatures with dark daggers, but despite the combined efforts of these 2 foes, they're no match for my spiritual hammers and we clear the level quickly. Midway through this level, I stop and decide to do an identification spree to try and clean up my inventory. And this one takes quite a while. You see, if you have a good memory, or if you're willing to take notes, and you have exceptional patience for constant saving and reloading, you can cheese the charges on your scrying glass. An item's identity is determined when the randomizer places it in the game. So if you save the game, identify an item, and learn that it's crap, such as these bracers of archery here, then you can reload the game and ditch the useless item and not have spent the charge from your glass. This is perfect, except when your game takes several minutes to reload, which can make it a real hassle, especially if you learn that you have nothing good in your inventory. So in an effort to clean up, like I mentioned, I put myself through this save and reload tedium for a fair bit of time, and in the process I do discover that I'm actually carrying two very powerful items. A Morningstar +3, which is great because +3 is the highest magic bonus that Dungeon Hack has for weapons and armor, and some gloves of Fire Giant Strength. These gloves raise my strength score to 22, highest that it can go in the game, and coupling this with my Morningstar and the Ring of Shocking Grasp, I now have a melee weapon that is going to chunk monsters. So we equip our combo and a single spiritual hammer in the offhand and set off once more. As we proceed down to the next floor, its amber walls and its tiled floor fill me with joy. I love this tile set, but the joy that it causes me is very short-lived, and it's replaced with despair as I see the enemies we face. Right here, as I'm prepping the buffs at the bottom of the stairs, a cockatrice swings into view. This flying murder chicken has the ability to petrify, which is one of the most unfun mechanics in the game, because it's non-interactable. You can't fix it, you're just dead immediately. If a cockatrice lands a hit on you and you fail the hidden saving throw, game over, period. I've had several runs ended by a shock corner rounding petrification stabbed from a cockatrice. Now there are scrolls in the game that allow you to cast a protection spell against this effect, but they aren't common and they don't last forever. The key to dealing with them is to keep your distance. Spiritual hammers, wands with ranged spells, etc., they all become your best friend. Now, if only I'd taken my own advice. Here you can see I get caught with my pants down going for a heal, and a cockatrice comes down the hall and it's game over as the petrify lands. So that's one death, but we're not on permadeath mode, so we reload the game and we get back to it. What? Alright, fine. I staged the whole thing. Look, it took several hits before I actually got petrified, and I definitely could have gotten surprise turned to stone at any point in time, a number of times, but I didn't. And I had to stage this in order to illustrate the mechanic for the video, because I had to show you, right? Like, I had to illustrate the fact that instant death mechanics in games are not fun. Right? Yeah, you had to see it. You had to. Right? Yeah. Anyway, armed with my Morningstar and my hammer, I make my way through the rest of the level. I'm careful to wreck the day of any cockatrice I see before it can turn me to stone, and we make our way down to level 6. Here's where the cracks of the randomizer start to show, environmentally speaking at least. This tile set, it just doesn't work. They look too dissonant, too disparate. And when I was a kid, I might not have noticed it, but as an adult, I definitely do. And I don't like it. However, the strange tile set aside, the level does a couple of amazing things. First, my favorite monster in the whole game is on it. Behold, the Minotaur. You know they're coming because of the admittedly kind of unfortunate sound, but then the model, the animation, it's so good. And they're accompanied on this level by the super cool Shade Knight thing. This floor is where I pick up my first Unestone also, magical stones that orb around your head and give you different bonuses. These effects can vary from increased ability scores, which unfortunately don't stack with certain things like Fire Giant Strength gloves. Sometimes they can give you regeneration, protections from various status ailments, and even sustenance that you don't need to eat anymore. They're pretty cool, and I also pick up the Shield of Fang. It's the first of 4 set items that I'll obtain through the course of this journey. There are 9 different sets in the game, and they have a variety of effects. The Fang set has a sword, which is +2, a shield, which is +2, which means they're not as powerful as other items like my Morningstar, and a helmet, which fears enemies sometimes, and armor, which is +2 and grants you a little bit of fire resistance. So none of them are particularly good enough for me to want to wear, because they don't give great bonuses to AC, and the fear effect doesn't do a whole lot, if I'm honest. So I don't use any of them. Since I'm dual wielding most of the game, I don't use the shield that's also part of the set for a very long because I put it on to see how cool it is, see if the armor bonus makes a big difference, and it doesn't, so I swap it back out. Beyond that, the rest of the level is pretty uneventful, aside from the totally rocking Minotaurs. Alright, look. I'm going to shoot straight with y'all, okay? I'm not going to do this for 25 floors. Because
Boo, Josh Strife Hayes would do it.
That man's voice itself is handsome, and he's British. Plus, his main coverage is on games that at least have some kind of story, or it's a deep dive into an MMO's mechanics. He's not covering some early 90s roguelike.
Mitch Mannix would do it.
Right, but he has a guitar, and his guitar solos can make any video epic. Have you seen his Guild Wars 2 video? Like, seriously, go watch it.
Mr. Edders would absolutely do it.
He's a world treasure, and his journalistic integrity is unparalleled.
You know William SRD would.
Yeah, and he's got a cat, and he's funny, and like, look, enough, okay? The reality is, I'm not gonna do it, because 25 floors of a monster murder simulator is not compelling. On floor 7, I pick up the Rod of Smiting, which is the best rod in the game. It's the best weapon in the game, period. And you know why? Because it can't be eaten by the monsters that eat your weapons. Oh yeah, little thing that I left out. There are monsters that eat the weapons right out of your hands, and you don't get them back when you kill them. They're just gone. And unlike in a real D&D campaign where a DM may put 1 or 2 of those in a dungeon as a challenging encounter, they're everywhere on the floor that they run into, and I ran into them multiple times. Okay? Once I get my Rod of Smiting, when I combine that with my Fire Giant gloves and my ring, it's game over. Everything about my build is complete, and it's only made gravy when I find a second rod later on. Okay? It becomes all about searching for better AC, and that's also rare. Loot became irrelevant. One of the core parts of a roguelike no longer mattered. And then, by the end, I was demoralized. 25 floors is a slog. It really is. It can kind of be fixed by cranking up your monster difficulty or your monster variety or your monster level. But my last 6 floors, I was facing duplicate monsters consistently, and it was packed to the gills with teleporters and hidden doors that were on muddy, discordant tile sets that made it very difficult to find them. Look, I'm not the only one to think this, okay? Back in 1994, when the game was first released, the infamous Scorpia wrote in Computer Gaming World that a 10 to 15 level dungeon was probably best, and I echo those sentiments. Honestly, I'd say 10 to 12 is the sweet spot. You get cool stuff done, you slay a bunch of monsters, and you have a good time. This isn't to say that Dungeon Hack is a bad game at all. I love this game, even with the plethora of flaws that I've pointed out throughout this video. What I'm saying is, Dungeon Hack is best served in small chunks. 10 levels, whatever settings you want. Have a good time, blast your way through, then put it down for a while. Because the gameplay is just not that deep. It's replayable, but it's not grindable, in my opinion. Now, this doesn't mean I'm not going to show you anything else. I'm not going to leave you in the lurch. I'll tell you that despite all my harping on about mage being important for improved identify, I don't get that scroll until floor 20. And while this has caused me a ton of stress because I knew it's why I rolled mage, it didn't matter because I'd been able to identify those core items for my build and nothing else was important at that point. I'm going to show you 2 levels. I'm going to show you the last level, of course, but I'm also going to show you the gimmicky underwater level and talk about why I call it that. Early on in the playthrough, and I mean really early, I picked up a bronze-colored helmet that I identified with the mirror, and it turned out to be a helm of underwater action. This let me breathe. This let me move. It nullified the mechanic. When I got to level 13, it was just a gimmicky floating bubble level that was a cool way to utilize, I guess, the water weird and water elemental monsters. And while those are some of the coolest monsters looking wise in the game, it didn't matter. And when I think back through the playthroughs I did for this video, as well as playthroughs in the past, it's very rare that I don't get some form of underwater helmet very, very early. The game is built to not just let you go and drown, I think, and that makes the level kind of pointless. Anyway, let's talk about the final level, all right? Level 25. At this point, I'm dragging and I am frustrated. I'm burned out on teleporters. I'd fought several floors of the same monsters, including, as we talked about, multiple floors of weapon-eating monsters, and there were several times where the randomizer just doubled down and gave me 2 of the same monster. It didn't even populate a second one. It just doubled up the population of the first one. So when I ventured down to that 25th floor, I didn't know what I was going to expect, but I admit I just wanted it to be over. And the game knew I was tired because it threw some of my least favorite things at me. It gave me Ettins, which hit really hard, and it gave me Scaladar, which are 2 of the worst enemies in the game if you aren't playing with undead. Now, they're not the worst. I could have had cockatrices and had to worry about petrification. I could have had more weapon-eating monsters, although with Rods of Striking that wouldn't matter. Or I could have had the invisible Greater Fair Nightmare things, which just crit you all the time. So it could have been worse. But these 2 have some of the worst sounds in the game. And that made this experience harder. The floor has 3 monsters right in a row, and I'm getting hammered. The lightning and the clubs are destroying my health, all while these sounds just taunt me. I push forward, my dual smiting rods, making pretty quick work of my noisy foes, and despite my demoralization, I am feeling confident that I can finish this quickly. But that confidence is shattered just a few minutes in as I round a corner, and after murdering the Ettin, I see another teleporter tucked back behind where the body would have been. For the 6th floor in a row now, I'm in a teleporter maze, and I admit I just about turned the game off. But I pushed through. I explored the level regardless, hoping that unlike the last level, which had 18 different teleporters, that was a huge hassle to navigate, this one would be better. And it turns out the randomizer takes some mercy on me because there aren't very many teleporters. It's a simple layout, and in just a few minutes and one tricky illusory wall later, I come face to face with the carrier of the orb. Yeah, that's why we're all here, remember? We're getting an orb for the floaty woman. This is the Elemental Lord. And without thinking, I charge in. Nothing up until this point has been a challenge for my dual rods of smiting, so why would this... What the heck? 41 points of damage? I back up. I try to work out my spells, but it's no use. I'm stunned by how hard this guy has hit me, and I fumble the controls. I don't get the Wall of Force separator up. I don't manage to get any heals off, and I die. All right, reload. Go again. This time I'm not going to fumble dead again. Well, let's change tactics. Reload again. Spiritual hammers this time. We'll fight this guy from range. And I last longer, I'll admit, but again, dead. I die 3 more times after this for a total of 6 deaths. I full rest and rebuff. I equip my shield. I try the Fear Aura, which of course does nothing against a boss monster. Finally, I re-equip both rods of smiting and I cheese open my holy symbol. I don't need the mini-map. This is my 7th attempt at this guy. I know where he is. I stalk him like prey. I lead with a firestorm, which is a mistake because he's so close and I hit myself with it. But then I start to land fast hits. I've got haste up. I back up, quickly swap to my healing spells. I hit that full heal, and then I'm raining wand smacks down as fast as my hasted hands can. I weave in another full heal and resume the beatdown. 2 more strikes, and I get him. It's right there in the text box at the bottom of the screen. I've bested the final monster, and the orb, I see it right there. Except I don't. They didn't, at least in this version. I remember as a kid having an orb appear, but anytime I played through to a finale in this version for my review, I never saw an orb drop. I have memories of it, but it wasn't there. We did it. 25 sloggy, grindy, teleport-laden levels later, an extraterrestrial 1 on 25. Top Hall of Fame slot, And now the victory cinematic. Enjoy, and again, shield your ears.
My thanks, adventurer. Now come, it is time for us to leave.
So there it is. Dungeon Hack. 25 floors on a mid-level difficulty. Several other playthroughs under my belt in the last couple of weeks, and looking back, is it as good as I remember it being? No. No, it's not. Let's be honest, it probably wasn't actually as good as I thought it was even back then. Dungeon Hack is a flawed game. It's hampered heavily by D&D's 2nd edition rules, and while it's randomized, there aren't really a ton of possibilities. It's all skin-deep randomization, in my opinion, and it's not as satisfying as I remember. But the final question is it fun? And honestly, in short bursts, it absolutely is fun, even with its flaws. I'll still keep it installed. I'll still boot it up a couple of times a year for a quick nostalgia-fueled 10 to 12 floor monster slaughter fest. But will I ever do a 25 floor delve again? Or turn on some of those super challenging settings? In all honesty, it's unlikely. I'm just here to have fun, and I don't want to taint my memory with another slog. With that, I've been Shrimpicles, and I have a lot more retrospectives coming in the future, so please be sure to subscribe and don't miss out on any future content. It's the best way to help out small YouTubers like me, and if you're interested, I'll be streaming my playthroughs of the upcoming games that I have for my channel over on Twitch. So click the link in the description, head over there and follow if that's the kind of thing that you're interested in as well. Of course, please consider leaving a like on a video and leave a comment below. Tell me your favorite nostalgia game. Who knows? Maybe you'll see it on the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.
Hurry! I am leaving! The adventure is over!
Look at all this treasure! My adventure has just begun.